Ladies and gentlemen, if you could grab a seat, we're about to get started. Wow, that's quick. I'm going to try to, we don't want to be here all night. That's the first agenda item, but I'm just going to read through what we're doing tonight, and then we're going to do it. So I'm Lenney, Senator from Nampa, Idaho, District 13, and it's really great that you are all here. You will meet these fine folks in a few minutes. They'll introduce themselves. So I'm going to go over the agenda, and then we'll get into it. So again, appreciate everybody being here. This is should be a fun event, and we want it to be a lot of, well, I'll get in here. Let me just read my notes or I'll be all over the place. So, these fine folks will introduce themselves in a minute. I thought it was important to hold all questions until the end because I think with what we talk about, like content-wise, questions I think are better at the end. It just makes the night flow better, but you might have a question and we might just answer it anyway. So if you could write down questions you have and hold them all to the until the end, we'll have a Q&A time. Would be preferred, or that's how we're going to do it. Another kind of housekeeping thing, the doors here, the outside doors all lock at 7 p.m. So if you have to go out to your car or something, you won't be able to get back in unless someone lets you back in. So there should be people in the hallway, but after 7 p.m., or probably right now, I suppose, the best way to get in and out of, if you have to go to your car or take a call or something, there's the door, if you go out and to the right, and it goes up the stairs, that's the door we want to try and stick to because the building kind of, you know, it's easy to get lost here. That's probably the better way to put it. We would like to be done, I would like to be done around 8-ish, but depending on how many questions we have and things like that, we'll see what happens. But we do have to be out of this room by 8:30. So 8:30 is like the hard cutoff date, but but we'd like to be done around 8. So what we're going to do format-wise is I'm going to say things for a couple more minutes, then I'll be quiet, I promise. We're going to have Senator Tammy Nichols. She's going to introduce legislation she's been working on with Anna Miller. They're going to talk about that and introduce themselves. We're going to go through a handful of school choice myths, because there's a lot of things out there that people are throwing out there that just, not even that they're wrong, it's just maybe it's like a half-truth or they're a category mistake or it's apples and oranges. So we're going to go over briefly some of the school choice myths, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end, if that makes sense. So I wanted to read a few stats before I have everybody introduce themselves, and I think the good panel here, if when we get to the myths, maybe you can just introduce yourselves when we get to that portion so we're not redundant, I suppose. So in 2019, everything I'm about to read is the most up-to-date statistics from the Idaho Department of Education. As up-to-date meaning the newest thing that's out there right now. In 2019, 37% of fourth grade students scored proficient or advanced in reading, but this year, meaning 2022, only 32% achieved the same results. Among 8th graders, and this is all Idaho specific by the way, 32% of Idaho students scored proficient or advanced in reading, down from 38% in 2019. So we're kind of going backwards there. 2022, 36% of fourth graders scored proficient or above compared to 43% in 2019. I realize we had the pandemic and that created some hiccups. But, SAT scores have been steadily declining since 2016. In fact, the percentage of students who met the benchmark has declined from 62% to 53%, which is a 15% decline since 2016, while the percentage of students who met the math benchmark has declined from 35 to 31%, which is an 11% decline since 2016. So that's a 6-year view there. Meanwhile, the percentage of students who met neither benchmark increased from 36% to 45%, a 25% increase over the same time frame. So student proficiency is lacking in Idaho. All of this to say that education in Idaho is broken. If we're having declining test scores and we're seeing students who are failing to leave school or while they're still enrolled in school and they're not proficient at grade level in math and reading, then something's wrong. And I would submit to you that it's because we've been betting on the same losing horse over and over and over and over again with diminishing returns. Governor Little on Monday in his State of the State address talked about making historic investments. He spent a lot of time talking about historic investments, but I have to ask, when is enough enough? I could go, I mean, I have all the numbers. Let me skip over some of this here, but over the last 2 years, from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 23, the appropriations for education have gone up 46%. 2 fiscal years, we've 46% increase in budget. For fiscal year 21 to 23, it's up 42%. So I have to ask, when is enough enough? We're increasing budget, we're increasing money, but we're not seeing the return on investment we would like. So we say we should get, using the horse analogy, we should get new trainers. Maybe we should pay the trainers more money. Maybe the trainers all need raises. Maybe we need a better stable. Maybe the stables need to be funded differently. Maybe if we fix the funding formula for the stable, the horse would get fixed. Maybe if there was a better saddle, new stirrups, better reins or bits, maybe better horseshoes, maybe we can literally just throw money at the horse, and that'll make the horse better. But at the end of the day, it's the same horse. So we are here today collectively to say that we need a better horse. Because continuing to pour water in the same leaky bucket, which by the way has been leaking for decades, is not going to help kids at the end of the day. And that's why we're all here, to help kids. It shouldn't be about systems or salaries or facilities or funding. Those things are important. We need to address these things. But at the end of the day, we're here to help kids. So, again, thank you for being here. I hope we can all come together around solutions that actually work for Idaho students, parents, and families. And with that, and just another reminder to try and hold all questions until the end. With that, we're going to get into the fun part, which is school choice myths. So we're going to go down the list here, and it starts with Senator Ben Taves. So, Ben, do you want to come up here?
So I'm Senator Ben Taves. I'm from District 4 up in the Coeur d'Alene area. And I'm going to go over, our first one is, actually the first one is just defining what is school choice, because I think there's sometimes some confusion about what that actually means, because it means a lot of different things. So school choice, I'd say fundamentally, it means parents being able to actually choose what educational options are best for their children's unique needs. So that's really what it means. How do you do that? There's a lot of different methods, and you'll hear the media talk a lot about vouchers. And vouchers, I would say, are one of the more limiting methods of school choice. It gives you, now you can choose between a public school and a private school. And so, school choice, what I'd like to see is I'd like to see as many options as possible. And a free market of options is ultimately, I think, what's best for our children. And I think that's what our legislation will accomplish. And the second myth that I'll go over is, and you'll hear this in the media as well, school choice advocates or conservatives want to destroy and or defund public schools. Have you ever heard that? Raise your hand if you have heard that. Okay. So I'm going to tell you that I can personally guarantee that that is not my goal. So that's a start, right? I'm a conservative. So let me ask our panel, how many of you went to a public school as part of your education? How many of you want to completely defund and destroy public schools? Okay, we got 0 out of the group up here that's presenting an option. So our goal is not to do that. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but my grandmother's an educator. My mother's an educator. I went to a public school. I actually had a great experience at the public school. I went to middle school at public school. I went to Coeur d'Alene High School, Lake City High School. I went to a public college, North Idaho College. And I went to a private university, Gonzaga University. So that is not at all our goal. It's not our intent. I believe, personally, I can speak for myself as a conservative, I believe that public school systems do a great job with a lot of students. I think that there's some serious issues with some public schools, but I think they work great for a lot of young people. They need accountability. All systems need accountability. All systems need accountability. And so adding accountability where if they are teaching something that's outside of the values of the community that they are in, that parents aren't forced to leave their kids in there if they don't have enough money to pull them out. I think that's fair, that they should be able to have an option if the school is teaching things that are outside of their value system. And regardless of your value system, I mean, we have in this room a very diverse group of value systems, I'm guessing. But I think that you could probably say that, let's say that you're an atheist, and would you want your kids forced to go to a Christian school? Turn it around, right? So let's just look at that. We look at it, I say as conservatives, more of that we want schools to have accountability, and it's not our goal to destroy or defund them, but to make them better, all schools better for our children. And that's our end goal, is to help our children. So I believe Tammy's going to go next on this.
Good evening. I'm Senator Tammy Nichols from District 10, and that takes in the Middleton, Star, and North Nampa area. I also attended public school just right down the street at Boise High, and I have 5 children. We live in Middleton, and 3 of them have already graduated from the Middleton Public School, and I have 2 that are in the high school there, and they have enjoyed their schooling experience. The myth that I am covering is in regards to vouchers versus an ESA. And you'll hear in the media, a lot of the narrative is that we're wanting to do a voucher program. Now, vouchers do have a place, and there is a way to be able to utilize them. But as you heard earlier, vouchers seem to be very limited. And so I wanted to give you the distinction between a traditional voucher program and an education savings account, or an ESA. So a traditional voucher program allows parents to use the state education dollars that are allocated for their child towards tuition at a private school of their choosing, including religious schools. And that can be done now because the Supreme Court did rule recently that public funds can go towards private schools. So continues, a state-approved organization writes out a check, which a parent endorses and then gives to the private school of choice, or the check is issued directly to a school under the parent's name. Typically, voucher programs also start out targeting certain groups of students in need of new learning opportunities, such as those from low-income families or students with disabilities. An education savings account, or an ESA program, allows parents to use the state education dollars that are allocated for their child towards a variety of different state-approved education-related expenses, such as tutoring or supplemental curriculums, mental health treatment, special education services and therapy, or tuition at a private school. This gives parents flexibility and control to access learning services that work best for their children. Parents access their child's share of state education assistance through a restricted government-authorized savings account, often in the form of a debit card. Like vouchers, ESA is also typically based eligibility on family income level or student disability status. So there is definitely a difference, and as you can see with that description, that a voucher program is much more limited. It's very specifically geared, and it targets certain demographics in our population. Whereas a education savings account, or like what we're wanting to accomplish, is a universal education savings account that can help all students, regardless of income, regardless of where they live, regardless of learning, disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. So that is the true thing that we are trying to do. We want to encompass all children because we believe that all children should have the ability to have an excellent education in an environment that works best for them, and that their parents maintain control and can utilize those funds, those taxpayer funds, to be able to service the education of their children. So that is another myth that we wanted to dispel, is that this is not a voucher program that we're wanting to accomplish. This is a true ESA program. And let's see this next one.
Okay, my name is Scott Herndon, and I hail from the only district in Idaho with an international border. Think about that. Which one is it? It's not Washington and Oregon. Okay? Okay, and I do say, along with President Trump, we should build that wall to keep Canadians out. Okay? I'm just kidding, and please, if you're Canadian, don't be offended. I have built vacation homes in Bonner County for Canadians, so hopefully my clients are happy here. Okay, so I'm going to cover a couple of myths about ESAs, about school choice, as it relates to, number one, cost. What does it do to our budget in Idaho? And number two, what does it do in rural school districts in particular? In my legislative district that I serve, we have 3 school districts, all the way at the top of the state. So we have a school district up in Boundary County, serving the Bonners Ferry area, and they stretch out rural. It's all entirely rural. And then in the Sandpoint area, we've got LPOSD. City of Sandpoint is not a major metropolis. Most of the students LPOSD serves is an entirely rural district. And then we have West Bonner schools over in the Priest River area. It's an entirely rural district. And so the question I want to answer is, what does it do for rural school districts? Is it bad for rural school districts? First of all, in our district right now, amongst these rural school districts, we already have some school choice. There are choices, and I'll give you one great example. Over in Old Town, Idaho, there is a private school called House of the Lord. It has tremendous demand. It is completely full. It has grown tremendously during COVID, particularly. And there are now hundreds of students in Old Town. Much smaller class sizes than West Bonner County schools serve. Now, who can afford to go to House of the Lord? In other words, who gets that school choice? It isn't the parent who's barely scraping by, because they have to come up with tuition money and it's a significant amount of money, thousands of dollars a year. And so only right now, the only people who have school choice in rural areas are people who are substantially well off. compared to the average family living in my district. They are the only people who have school choice. Now, we do have a charter program. We also have other charter programs starting, so that's good. But consider what school choice is. It isn't just about what's available there today. School choice in a rural area is about what could be available in the future. More private school options, but also we live in 2023 now, and one thing COVID has shown us is that we're not confined to our physical limits of our existence. There is a lot of capability online now as well. My daughters learn all of their music, and they're very talented. It's 100% online is where they get their tutoring. And we live in rural Bonner County. So what school choice offers is it is the opportunity to introduce to everybody options. I'm going to correlate school choice to university education. If you think back, I graduated, I've done public school, K through 8. I went to a private school for high school. And then coming out of high school, what did I have? School choice. I could go to this public university, that public university, that private university, that trade school. I had a lot of choices, and I got to pick. And the real key about school choice is that not everybody is the same. And a one-size-fits-all program doesn't work for everybody. So what we're trying to address today is you heard some of the performance statistics that are occurring right now in Idaho education. If I have 8 children, if I had half of them not performing at reading level, I would feel like a tremendous failure. Yet that is the norm for public education around the country. And it doesn't matter if you spend 8 times more like New York or 5 times more like in California, the results don't really change. What needs to change is the options available. And I'm going to give you an example. So now let's talk about cost, because that's another argument, is that it costs too much. Number one, education in Idaho is our number one budget item. So we're spending billions of dollars on public education right now. And we would continue to do that. And right now, Idaho enjoys, in our general fund, a tremendous budget surplus. We can afford, along with maintaining bridges, we can afford, along with maintaining roads, to add opportunity to increase the chance of success for our students. And the amount of money that we're going to be talking about tonight is relatively insignificant, and it is in addition to what we are already planning to spend on public education. So this is in addition to, and its goal is to offer the custom-tailored programs that improve the success of our students. So those are a couple of the things I wanted to cover for you, and I'm sure there will be more as you have your questions later. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Miller. I'm the director of the Center for American Education at Idaho Freedom Foundation. There's a few additional myths that I wanted to address. The first one is you'll hear a lot, particularly in the media and even among some legislators in school choice discussions in Idaho and across the country, that school choice does not help rural students. I live in a rural area. I live in Horseshoe Bend. There's like 700 people in Horseshoe Bend. It doesn't really get much more rural than that. I grew up in North Carolina in a small town called Midhill that had less than 1,000 people at the time that I lived there. So I understand what it's like to live in a rural town where there's only one school, and that school is the employment for a lot of people. It's the only option for anyone to go to school, unless you want to homeschool or unless maybe you want to drive an hour to a private school. So I understand what it's like. However, it's a huge myth that school choice doesn't help rural schools. And it's a rather elitist argument. It's the argument that school choice for me, but not for thee. Right now, rural students actually have more options than ever before. We have what used to be called during the pandemic pods, or micro schools, which are an incredible innovation, and they're popping up all over Idaho. I know of one micro school in a rural area where a teacher has taken in 10 students, and he's able to take them on 3 international trips every year just with the funds that they've been able to put together. That's one option, but of course, not every student in a rural area can afford that. Their money is tied up in the local public school. There's homeschooling, there's homesteading. Some families prefer online education, some don't, but there's plenty of good online education options. So there are plenty of options for rural students. You know, personally, I would love to drive 45 minutes to a really excellent private school from my home. And that's what I hope to do with my child in several years when he's old enough to go to school. So there are options. The other myth that particularly pertains to rural schools and why school choice doesn't help rural students is this idea that school choice defunds public schools. All school choice programs across the country, they leave a certain percentage of funding behind in a public school when the student leaves the school. So if this is really about funding, everyone should be an advocate for school choice, because that school has more per pupil spending when a child leaves than when they're having to retain the cost of educating that child. So that's what I'll say about rural students. Rural students deserve school choice and options and the funding to meet their needs just as much as students who live in a suburb or a city. The next myth I want to address is this idea that school choice is not constitutional. There's been several court rulings on school choice, but 2 are of utmost importance. The first, I believe it was Zelmans versus Simmons-Harris, I believe that's the correct name of it. What it decided is basically that when you are establishing a school choice program, it's constitutional because you are funding the private choice of that family. You're not directly funding the private school. You're funding private choices, completely constitutional. The second school choice Supreme Court decision that's very significant is Espinoza versus Montana. And in that Supreme Court ruling, they decided that school choice programs cannot discriminate against religious private schools. So that case also specifically addressed what are called Lane amendments. Lane amendments are amendments to many state constitutions. A lot of states have them, including Idaho, that say you cannot use funds at religious schools. So Espinoza versus Montana completely blew that amendment out of the water. It's considered dead law. You cannot use a Lane amendment as basically an excuse in any state for not establishing a school choice program. So those are just, I think, some important things to recognize. I'm looking forward to answering further questions. Thank you.
So adding, that was, I know there's probably 1,000 questions in here, we realize that, so we'll get to those in a minute. And then just really quickly, before Senator Nichols comes up and presents our actual legislation, Anna mentioned the Lane Amendment. So we do have that in Idaho, in our Constitution, like she mentioned. Specifically in Idaho, it's Article 9, Section 5. Well, I had a great conversation with our new Attorney General, some associates from his office today, actually just like 2 or 3 hours ago, about this specific issue, saying this Lane Amendment we have in our Constitution, as Anna pointed out, these Supreme Court decisions render it dead. So what is the official opinion from the Attorney General's office? And the official answer I got was, in Idaho, the Lane Amendments are in fact dead, and they hold no weight. So they were completely nullified by the Supreme Court, and our Attorney General, the Attorney General's office gave that official opinion to me today, and which is also why I have pending legislation to amend the Idaho Constitution to actually repeal the Lane Amendment and just take it out, strike it out, throw it in the trash where it belongs. So that's good news for Idaho, and we have an amazing Attorney General who recognizes that. So with that, Senator Nichols and Anna, I don't know how you both coordinated it, but they both worked on this bill. They've been working on it for a long, long time, so I'm going to come up they're going to come up and show you what we got cooking.
All right, so thank you so much again for being here tonight. I'll have to start and just say, I've been in the House for the last 4 years. Education is actually what got me into the political spectrum field because of my children and the education that they were receiving and being involved. I was that parent that was in there for parent-teacher conferences and helping in the classrooms. I taught Spanish for a little while to the kindergartners, to field trips, picture days, recess supervisor, football mom, the whole shebang. I've always been involved in my kids' education because it's that important to me. And I come from a family that also ran private schools in Boise for many, many years. And my stepfather is a retired English teacher. And so we've always had education in our lives, not only from going to school, but because we participated in many different ways. And so it's always been very important to me. But being in the House for 4 years and seeing what's transpired in education, and we've read a lot of statistics this evening, there just seems to be something that's missing. And if we're really about giving children a good quality education, I think that we want to give them as many opportunities as there are possible for them to achieve that. So as I was talking to constituents, and again, COVID did a lot of different things. It opened up our eyes to a lot of different things, and education was one of those things. And I had parents contacting me during COVID on all sorts of different issues, from the schools being shut down to masking, to things that their kids were learning. We started hearing about something called critical race theory, and the list just went on. And I was getting tons of emails, lots of phone calls, and parents were very concerned about what was happening in education. And so I started just trying to keep my ear to the ground to see, how can we improve education in Idaho, and how can we make things better for our students? Well, just this last year, Arizona passed a education savings account. And this ended up becoming the gold standard for ESAs throughout the nation. Arizona passed it first, and then West Virginia also passed it, and now there are about 13 more states this year that are looking at passing an Arizona model ESA bill. And so I started talking with Anna here about what can we do for education in Idaho. And I talked to several other people, some nationally known people, some of the legislators from Arizona, and just try to figure out what would be the best way. Well, Arizona spent 10 years getting to their model legislation that they utilize. So they've already been through all the obstacles, all the ups and downs. How does it work for rural students? How is it going to work for the state? How much is it going to cost? Just any question you can come up with. They really looked through it and came up with their piece of legislation that they passed. And so, because they had so many people that started participating in this program to begin with, and when I say a lot of people, most states that we have found that pass some sort of ESA, it's about 1% plus or minus of students that start participating in it when they start this program up. So you're not talking like a huge amount. But if you remember charter schools, when those first came into the state, they were kind of known as a fringe fad type thing that was going to happen. Some people said they were never going to last. We weren't going to have charter schools would not survive in Idaho. Nobody would want to go to them. And now what do we see? We see charter schools everywhere, and we see lots of students that are participating in it. And so ESAs are kind of similar. They start out kind of small, and they can grow as they become more familiar. And so I didn't want to work backwards. So we took Arizona's piece of legislation, the bill that they actually passed, and used that as a springboard. But we wanted to also incorporate some Idaho components to it. And so we're going to go over some of those things briefly. We're not going to talk, we haven't released the legislation yet. It's still in a draft form, so we're not going to really speak specifically to every component of that piece of that draft that we have right now. But it will be coming out soon. We're finishing up just a couple of little things in it, and then we do want to release it to the public as soon as possible because we want you to see it. But I just wanted to go over some of the overviews of it. And so the eligibility with this particular draft is that it's a savings account program. It's available to any Idaho student who is eligible to enroll in a public school. The scholarship amounts that we're looking at right now are approximately $5,950. Now, as it was mentioned earlier, the public school where the student would be attending still does get some money out of that. So they're not losing out on all of the money for that student, even though they may not be there.
Specifically, 20% of state funds and then all federal and local funds are retained by a district.
So it's a pretty good win still for the public school. I wanted to really touch on some of the eligible expenses because, like we talked about earlier, vouchers are very, very limited. It's very narrowly crafted. Where an ESA such as this is very wide. So some of the options that parents could utilize for their students are tuition or fees at a private school or online program approved by the State Department of Education, required textbooks, educational therapies from a licensed or accredited provider, tuition for approved vocational and life skill education, educational and psychological evaluations, assisted technology rentals, and Braille translation, goods and services, tutoring, curricula and supplemental materials, fees for standardized tests or college entrance exams, tuition or fees at an eligible post-secondary institution, textbooks required by an eligible post-secondary institution, fees to manage the Freedom in Education Savings Account, classes and extracurricular programs offered by a public school, school uniforms, transportation to and from a qualified school, computer hardware and technology devices, including calculators, personal computers, laptops, but it does not mean that you can go down to Best Buy and buy a TV or a video game console or things like that. It's not that. Again, we're looking at approximately 1%. That's our starting point. And so we would be asking for approximately $20 million to be able to implement this program. And so that's a drop in the bucket. I mean, if you're looking at a pie chart and all the money that we're putting into education, it's like this little tiny sliver. And that is what we'd be asking for to begin with on this. The thing that I really like about this is we want to make sure that parents are involved. There's nothing I think that's more important than parents being involved in their children's education and to be active in it. It's always very depressing to me when I go to parent-teacher conferences, and sometimes I'm the only parent sitting in the classroom seeing how my child is doing. No other parents there. And so I really want to make sure that parents are involved. So this piece of legislation would also set up a parent review commission. And there would be 6 members who are parents of students participating in the program that would be on it. 1 member will be appointed by the President of the Senate, 1 by the Speaker of the House, 1 by the Senate Minority Leader, and 1 by the House Minority Leader, and 2 by the Governor. So we want to give a good basis for parents to be able to be involved, be on that commission, and their kids are actually in the program, so they can get firsthand experience on how this program is working and if it's meeting all the needs that we have. Do you want to add something to that?
Sure. So basically, I don't know if you all have heard about what happened in Arizona. I think Tammy mentioned it. They spent 10 years trying to figure out how to do school choice right. And this last year, they established a Universal Education Savings Account program, and it's being heralded as the gold standard across the country for school choice. What we learned from Arizona is not that every single other state should take 10 years to do something right. It's that we finally learned how to do something right. It is the most successful school choice program in the country, and there's over 40 school choice programs in the country right now. Just last year, or about a year ago, 20 states expanded or created new school choice programs. Idaho currently has 0 school choice programs. Now, we do have some levels of choice that are better than other states. We have choice within our public education system. Students can go to a charter school. They can apply for and win the lottery to go to a charter school. They can actually choose among their district schools, which is amazing. That wasn't the case in the town or in the state that I grew up in. And that's excellent, and that's something that makes Idaho better and unique. And so, as you would assume, more choice will only improve our education system. So students shouldn't only be able to choose among public options, they should be able to choose among all options, public and private. And that's really a first step to ensuring that parents are in the driver's seat of their children's education. That's one of the main goals of school choice. It's the idea that the parent has the knowledge and the right to direct their child's education and care, not the government. Right now, the way our education system is set up, across the whole country is government bureaucrats assign your child to a school. They look at your zip code and they say, we know everything that we need to know about your kid. We know about all of their unique needs, apparently, so we're going to assign you and put you in a school. That's where you get to go. And again, there are some better options in Idaho where you can at least choose among public schools, but we're still assigned to a public school. And that's a very limited view of what a child needs. And the government should not have that power over something as important as a child's education, something that will completely change the trajectory of their life. And so school choice just allows parents to make the best choices possible for their child. And every single child in our state deserves to have that opportunity. And that's why a school choice bill should be universal. It shouldn't be limited just to special needs students. It shouldn't be limited just to low income students. It should be available to every single kid because these dollars belong to families. They don't belong to a particular institution. They exist to serve families and to meet their needs. Yes, so a lot of people always have questions about how does a school choice bill work as far as accountability to taxpayers and to families. So the first point I want to point out is accountability doesn't begin with government. Accountability does begin with parents when it comes to your child's education. You know your child the best. You should be trusted to make educational decisions for your child. But at the same time, in the school choice bill, we do need accountability for taxpayers. We need to make sure that funds are spent on approved expenses, that there's not some dishonest citizen out there taking funds to Best Buy and buying a TV or whatever it may be. So the kind of accountability mechanisms that would be in a policy like what we have discussed are an annual audit that can be contracted for with a private institution of the private education savings account. These are not private family bank accounts, okay? These are separately established bank accounts that are operated by the state treasury. And so a private organization would be contracted for to conduct annual, random, and quarterly audits of the account to make sure that they are being spent on approved expenses. Additionally, if there were any instances of fraud where something was being spent on, like I said, a TV at Best Buy or whatever it may be, the Attorney General would be authorized to investigate that case. And studies across the country evaluating school choice programs that have these mechanisms in them for accountability show that fraud is extremely rare. When it does occur, funds generally can be recouped because states are facilitating direct payments to and from providers. So again, it's rare and they can generally easily be recouped. If there are any losses, they're very, very low. There are some states in their school choice programs that have testing requirements or that have reporting requirements to the government for you to participate in the program. Policy that we're talking about doesn't have any of that. If you're someone who's a fan of homeschooling, you still do not have to take a state exam if you chose to be a part of this program. So I know there's a lot of homeschool families, and I used to be homeschooled for many, many years, so I totally understand it. And I was in a state where we had to submit tests to the government, and again, I think accountability begins with parents. So a policy like this does not have that in it, and it's an opt-in program. So it's a family's independent choice whether or not they want to participate in it. This is for families that voluntarily want to participate because they need funds and they know how to meet their child's needs.
All right, thank you. I really want to get to questions and answers because I think that actually is the best way to talk about ideas and legislation. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of leave with this, that, the goal again is to educate the child. I truly believe that funds should follow the students and not fund the systems, and that we want to make sure, again, that we have quality education that is educating the child. We, like I said before, we hear a lot about, increasing in teacher pay, building maintenance. In my district right now, there's overcrowding that's going on. When you allow more choice, it usually works out some of the other issues that are transpiring. And so when we can put a program together and see the results, like Arizona has been seeing with their program, and be able to take what they have and put it into Idaho and make it adaptable to students that are in Idaho, I think we're going to have some really good results with that. And when you allow the free market to work and you allow competition, you usually end up with a greater result than what you had before. And so I'm going to leave it at that, and we'll go ahead and do questions and answers. How did you want to do this? We'll repeat any questions that come in, because we want to make sure everybody hears the question and we don't have a microphone that we're passing around. And so if you would just tell us what your question is, and if it's specific to a certain legislator or if it's just a general question, we can all kind of tag team on it. So,
All right, we forgot to get the portable microphone, so I'll just kind of direct traffic and we could answer as needed. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I apologize for this question in advance. And maybe there's some misunderstanding on my part, but let's just say that there's a hypothetical conservative out there that does not want to fund public education. And they are for this ESA, but they don't want the 20% going to public schools. I'm not saying it should be that way, but I'm asking why not just make 100% go? And is it that public schools is this ESA saying, all right, you get X amount of dollars and 20% of that still going to public schools, or is the ESA saying you get to save that money like an HSA and fund it that way, and 20% of that is still going to public schools?
So for the folks back, I wish I had a microphone, but for people watching online, the question, and for people who couldn't hear it here, the question was, why are we giving, say a student wants to not be a part of the public school and go to whatever program and participate in the ESA program, why is the public school still getting 20% of that?
That was the gist, yeah.
Okay, that sounds like an Anna answer.
Sorry.
That's an answer, Cody.
Okay, I guess. See, this is why we've been so busy all day, we forgot to get microphones. But yeah, you should probably come up here.
So the first reason is that a state is not authorized to just give away all federal and local dollars. We can access state dollars for a program. This is a state program. We can access state dollars. That's what we have jurisdiction over. So the pot of state dollars in Idaho, it's around $8,000. The rest is federal funds. We spent close to $12,000 as of this last year based on the State Department of Education's data. So yes, we are leaving a lot of funds. That's a great point. We're leaving a lot of funds behind public schools under a school choice program like this. One reason for this is it's easy to calculate the specific number that's in this bill, and it correlates very closely to the fact that in this specific fund, 80% of these funds are state dollars, and we're taking 80% of that fund, and it's called the General Maintenance and Operations Fund within the State Department of Education's calculations. And so 80% of that is around $5,950. Another reason for this is politics. It's very hard to take 100% of funds if you were to want to do that. I don't know of a state that is currently doing that. Some states, their allocations are lower. Some states are higher than 80%. I know some states that take as much as 90%. I don't know of a state of all the school choice programs across the country that takes 100%. So that's not really something that's been done yet. It's not considered best practice in school choice policies, but it's something theoretically you could do, but I just don't see it happening. So.
If groups conservatives don't want to defund public schools completely.
Sure, I was talking about a hypothetical. Sure. Not you guys.
Other questions? Okay.
I have concerns about Arizona's requirements for the credentials for people who would be giving instruction to students. I'm thinking of somebody who maybe is going to teach dance to kids. And they have, in Arizona, they have to have some sort of certificate or some sort of credential that says, and to me, that restricts an awful lot. I think I'm probably getting my point across.
Yeah, so I think you're speaking to the fact that Arizona has different K-12 accreditation requirements and teacher certification requirements and things like that than Idaho does. Any policy that's adopted in Idaho, it has to be adapted to fit our current code. It wouldn't change existing accreditation or teacher certification or anything like that. It would fit within our existing code, and this policy has no restrictions for certain certifications that teachers have to get, or which private schools are eligible based on accreditation. None of that is in this policy, and actually none of that is in Arizona's bill. Those are separate areas of Arizona code that govern those types of things. Arizona's law does not have any restrictions like that for the school choice program.
But I was talking in terms of more of the extracurricular stuff, the music lessons, as opposed to, so if somebody's doing.
No.
Credentials.
No, those
Okay,
not
it
required.
doesn't change
That's
any of
like
that.
for kids or-
Yeah.
Yes.
I think this question is more for Ms. Nichols. When you talked about the eligible expenses in that bill, you said tuition or fees, and I believe the rest of it was approved by the State Department of Education, is that correct?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
does that mean that the schools, so there's like a list?
To that microphone and ask the question up there, can you try to?
I can repeat it.
Yeah.
So are you asking, are the schools approved, that participate in this program approved by the State Department of Education?
Yes.
So the way that approval process works in an education savings account like this is that education service providers such as private schools or anyone else that wants to participate in this program, that wants to be able to accept these funds, they submit notice to the State Department of Education that they want to participate. State Department of Education approves them because the State Department of Education cannot discriminate against private offers under existing constitutional law.
And so even if they were unaccredited, they could apply to be part of it?
Yeah, you do not have to be an accredited institution to receive these funds.
And we have something that's going on like that right now. It's called Empowering Parents. And if you go on the Empowering Parents, which is something that the governor's office set up, there are tons of different, I'd say there's 396 actually. Because I actually just signed up for it because I wanted to try it out and see what it was like. So there's 396 different providers that are on there. And you have things from like ballet lessons, what do you take? Jiu-jitsu, yes, jiu-jitsu lessons. There are some tutoring, and there were several from my area in Middleton of people that provide different types of educational opportunities, and they're not all accredited type organizations or businesses. You also had Amazon on there, you also had Apple on there, you had some of those guys as well. So it falls with, it doesn't change any of the way that we're doing education right now as far as accreditation or certifications or any of that goes. It's just giving parents control over the dollars and have those dollars follow their students.
And I'd like to add one thing that we haven't discussed yet, which is the rollover funds. It actually encourages frugality, and if you're able to educate your students effectively for $2,000 a year, the money is roll over and you could use them for trade schools or for college as well. So something that encourages frugality would be, I think, refreshing.
First of all, I think, I'm not a plant, but I think all of you ought to belong to the Idaho Freedom Foundation. And I'm a member myself. Second, I think when you talk about the different ways you spend your money, think about it like a 529. Familiar with that? When you send your kids to college, you save the money. So that, if you ever got audited, you'd have to prove where your receipts went, right? So you just keep a file at home, what you spend it on, you write it on a piece of paper, and you keep it in your kid's education file. So that's simple. And I have followed Arizona. I have a cousin that's there and put 6 kids through their education system. And I think it's good. So I'm all behind you guys. My question to you is, how do you see, I went Monday night to Caldwell, you see what they want to do in the city. You guys, we need to be involved in this or we're going to get run over. We are going to be destroyed, and they're groomers and they're trying to tear our children apart. Oh, it's terrible. So, what are you seeing as a whole, you guys, that are our representatives? Is this Are people adapting? There's no downside to it, really. If you look at it objectively, there's not a downside. How do you view your peers? Where are they at on this process?
Well, several of us serve on the education committee. Actually, all four of us serve on the education committee. And, the Senate has changed this session. It's going to be a different Senate. And so the education committee on the Senate side, the majority of the members on there.
People can't hear.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Just go up to the mic, Dan.
Just real quick, is Curtis Elmore still on that committee?
Sorry, okay. So the Senate has changed quite a bit, and we have a lot of new legislators that are in there, including serving on the Education Committee. All four of us down here are on the Education Committee. And there is a strong consensus that a lot of us part of our platform was running on school choice.
And we have half new people.
Yeah, we have 45 new legislators.
Right.
So a lot of us ran on school choice because of the situations that we experienced firsthand or from constituents that we already had. And so there is a strong consensus of wanting to get some sort of school choice program passed. Now, my answer when we're talking about, well, what kind should we do is we shouldn't just pass something just to say that we passed it. We want to pass something that's actually going to work and actually going to do meet the expectations that we put into place that we want to see done. The House side, I believe there's a strong consensus there as well to pass some sort of education savings account. But again, we want something that's actually going to facilitate a quality education where it actually gives choice to the families and where those dollars actually do follow the student. So I believe that we have a really good opportunity. This is kind of a window that we have right now, and now's the time to get that passed. Now, does that mean that everybody's going to be in support of it, or that we might not face some stumbling blocks with chairman or what have you? That could happen, definitely. That's where we need the people to come into play and start contacting the representatives, contacting the chairman, and telling them that they want a education savings account bill heard. There's a few other ideas that are floating out there. I don't believe that they are as strong as what this one is, because again, we're utilizing 10 years of experience and that Arizona went through to get to their piece of legislation that they passed. So they've already been through a lot of the ups and downs and figured out a lot of the issues that could come into play. So I think now is the time. We need to take advantage of it, and we need to get this done in Idaho. Idaho should be this year, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's go over to this gentleman in the brown.
You began your presentation with statistics on student success or failure. Is there any mechanisms in place for this particular program?
So the question was, we started with a lot of statistics, and is there any, how is this program going to help some of those low statistics that we, and tracking it.
What is the tracking mechanism?
Yeah, the tracking mechanism. Well, again, this opens up the opportunity for all types of education, and what's working for one child and one type of education, may not work for another one, and we know that that's true. And what one child might be experiencing right now, and maybe they're not doing well in school, and they're not, performing well. So if they're moved to another opportunity where maybe they can excel better. Again, it's going to go back to, we'll see statistics that'll come out. There's always testing that's going on. Not everybody has to test their kids at home. Homeschooling, they do not have to do assessment tests. But I think we're going to see, I think what we'll also see, and this is one of my hopes, is that we'll see more students going into trade programs, more students being able to take opportunities in higher education. We don't have that high of a rate of kids going into college. And so I'm hoping that will raise the bar in that way as well.
I'm not sure I was necessarily looking to get them in college, just
sure.
Are they performing
performing?
or above level?
Anna, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I will just say that there are 28 studies across the country, 28 existing studies across the country of school choice's effects on existing public schools. 25 of those 28 studies found positive effects of the competitive benefits of school choice in the sense that those academic outcomes in those public schools improved where school choice programs are operating. So in a program like this, over time, you would definitely expect academic outcomes to improve, not just test scores, but higher rates of graduation from high school, more students going to college, and a whole number of other benefits.
I'm on your side. You're going to get hit with that question from opponents.
Yeah, and that's what we want, is we want that dialogue. So, okay, there was one over here that I saw. Yeah, in the hat.
Hi, Senator Lenney, I just needed some clarification on the statistics that you started out from the Idaho Department of Education about if the statistics you gave were from public, private, and charter schools, were those all-encompassing, or was that just public?
So the question was on clarification on statistics.
Yeah, so it was from the public schools, just by themselves.
Okay, so is there any current statistics from the private and charter sector, so we can actually know that if we're going to be funding those schools, that they're going to be successful?
Look at Nampa Christian, they never closed a day and they're 2 years ahead in their academics.
There is complete data on
as a taxpayer, I need to know that if we're talking about the future of our children, okay, it's important, and we're having a conversation here about the future of our children. We need to make sure our funds are going to a place where our children are going to succeed.
That's why parents get to direct.
That's an important question.
And there's statistic-driven results, and that's why I need my question answered.
So Anna, I think, has a response to that.
The State Department of Education does.
Oh, hold on 1 second. So it was on statistics, and if the statistics that were given were mainly public school statistics, and how do we know that private schools or charter schools or other opportunities are providing good statistics? Yeah, take it away.
So yes, the State Department of Education does compile test scores and other data for charter schools and all public schools in the state. Generally, what we find is that many charter schools in the state are outperforming a lot of different district schools, not in every case, but in a lot of cases. Not all private schools, and obviously most homeschoolers don't choose to take state exams, and that's their right to do so. One thing that you said is that, well, if we're funding those private schools, then we should know what their tests are. So as Espinoza versus Montana ruled, the school choice program is not funding private schools. It is funding private choices of families. So this policy does not directly fund schools. Another thing I would point out, though, is that, so test scores are important, but they're not the only important accountability measure. If private schools weren't succeeding, why would families choose those schools? Why would they continue to send their children there if their children were failing? They're paying a heck of a lot more money, and they're paying twice because they're also paying for public schools. And that's how the free market works. If you're not meeting your customers' needs,
that's right, then
you go out of business. Yep. So private schools simply would not exist if they were not meeting a very sincere need in our society. In contrast, the public system is a monopoly. It's a government-run monopoly, and about 90% of kids are stuck in public schools. And what a school choice program does is it introduces competition into that monopoly. Therefore, the incentives of public schools are changed such that they now have to meet the needs of their customers. And this is really important. The private system does this. The public system should have to do this too.
Bingo.
And it's a rising tide that lifts all boats. Everyone will improve.
Yep.
That Espinoza versus Montana, that voucher program is for the funding of private schools where there is no schools around. Is that correct?
Sorry, just to clarify what Espinoza versus Montana was, I think I mixed up that with Zelman's Harris. So Zelman versus Simmons Harris established that when a school choice program is funding a private choice of an individual, not the private school. Espinoza versus Montana established that wherever a school choice program exists, you cannot discriminate against families that choose private religious schools. So families that choose, that's a very important aspect of that sentence. You cannot discriminate against families that choose private religious schools. Yes, with the cowboy hat.
So, real quick, I just want to say something here to address this. Your concerns are exactly why you want to be behind this program. Because the people that have their kids in the public schools right now, if you're having to go, right now, the bus picks them up, takes them where they need to be, it's the school that's closest to you, so the convenience factor is in the school they're in right now. But if you have a kid that's not succeeding, and you say, hey, I need to put them somewhere where they're successful, now you have an option to move them, whether you have the money coming into your family or not. You can put them where you want to. So the parents who are actually paying attention to the education and how good their kids are doing in that education are the ones who are going to be moving them around, the ones who are paying attention to it. So it's going to self-govern in that path.
And they can hire private tutors with that money.
Exactly. But my question is, I'm just kind of curious, has anybody pulled the governor on this, and is he going to try to veto this, or does he seem like he's on board?
Well, I can't speak for the governor. I would hope he would be on board with this. He seems like he's very much into education and wants good education for the students in Idaho. He wants students to stay in Idaho, like go through the schooling, go to secondary education or into trade or what have you, and then have take jobs that are in Idaho so that we're retaining our students here. So, and that is important. We want, I've been in Idaho for a long, long time. My family came here before Idaho was a state. And so we've been here a long time. There's a reason that we stay here in Idaho. There's a reason people are moving to our state like they are. And so we want to make sure that the education component is also very quality driven, and that we are giving that free choice, that ability to choose, right, to families to be able to get the education that they need for their students. You want to talk about that? Oh, sure.
Yeah, so according to the latest polling data, I just wanted to talk about
constituents, right?
Yeah, since this is about their constituents, according to the latest polling data, 68% of all adults in Idaho currently support education savings accounts, and 74% of school parents support them.
Okay, the gentleman in the red shirt, and then we'll do the blue one right above.
Yeah, I have a couple of written statements. If I could just submit those to you guys rather than take everybody's time.
Yep. Senator Lenney will come and get those from you.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, the gentleman in the blue, right up here.
I had an answer for the gal with the hat. In November of this past year, the New York Post put an article together, and they reported that Catholic schools stayed the same in the same levels that he was quoting, and that I'm not arguing for Catholic schools, but they said they stayed the same while the public schools went down. So I can give you that information if you want to come to it.
There's a lot of information that's out there now. I mean, there was just an article that came out just 3 days ago in regards to rural schools and how those schools have seen school choice really facilitate improvement and give more opportunities. And like we said, this isn't just about traditional mortar schools that we're talking about. There are all sorts of different opportunities. Again, COVID kind of brought a lot of this on. But there are so many different options now for education, and so why stop with just a brick and mortar school when there's other options out there? And if it's not working for your child, then you should be able to take them somewhere else where things might work better. Okay, let's see, this gentleman right here in the blue.
Currently, public schools are the only ones that can place bonds and levies. Will this affect those in any way?
No, this has nothing to do with bonds and levies. That's a separate part of this education puzzle that we have, so that would have to have legislation.
So basically the property taxes still get affected by
This does not, unfortunately, change any of that. All this does is it directs the ability for parents to utilize the money, the tax dollars for their students' education. Okay, this gal in the front here.
So you're saying that you're proposing for $20 billion. How many students will that cover?
So $20 million is what we're asking for funds, and we're anticipating about 1% of our student population to start participating in that program. Now, as it progresses, I'm sure that will increase, but right now it's $20 million that we'd be asking for. Let's see, there's the gal in the back here.
I want to thank you for having this and
Sure.
talking about ESAs and educational choice. But I want to just proffer just a little bit different opinion than maybe some other people have tonight. I'm a part of a homeschooling family. We've been homeschooling my children since they were born. My children have never been in a public school in their life. I have a 17-year-old who's a senior senior is a commended national scholar in the National Merit Finalist Program. He's also a national top 50 winner for the CLT 10. We've never taken a dime of public money in our entire life. We've sacrificed vacations. We've sacrificed new cars. We've sacrificed a whole lot of stuff to keep the government out of my educational choice. So we actually do have vast educational choice in this state. Every parent in this room and every parent in our state has the ability right now to make a choice for their student. Private schools in this state are wonderful. I have two nieces that graduated from Ambrose. Ambrose High School is $10,000 a year. Your $5,000 or $6,000 isn't going to touch that for them. Napa Christian is an outstanding educational choice, and those parents are making sacrifices every single day to send those kids and pay for that themselves. And so I would just like to encourage you to remember that we actually do have school choice in this state. Every parent has the right to educate their student in exactly the way they want to. And I am so grateful to live in this state. I'm a 4th generation native. My husband's a 5th generation native. My children are 6th generation natives. And I hope that I will die in this state. And I appreciate that you want to change education in this state. But I just want to remind you that we have a good system. Public schools need help. But if we pull funding from them, they get even worse. And that doesn't help me as a citizen of this state or my children. We have outstanding test scores. We have test scores from people that are taking the money, the government money right now, to homeschool their children at home, to privately school their children at home, and their test scores are not good. And so with government money comes accountability. I don't want my taxpayer dollars to be unaccounted for, and neither do any of you. I think we would all agree that we expect our legislators, when they fund something, to have accountability for those funds. And so free money isn't free, is what I just want to remind everybody. Free money isn't free, and there's always strings attached no matter how good it sounds. Kentucky recently passed an ESA, and it was ruled unconstitutional by their state Supreme Court because the way that their laws are written is they can only fund one public school. So there could be things like that that come down the pipe. But I very much appreciate you wanting to take a look at education and trying to make some changes. I think that's the right move. But I don't think attaching government funds, and I know it's a choice, but I think ESAs are not the way to go. I think we have choice in our state as it is.
Is there a question there?
Yeah, it's a speech. You made me speak.
Yeah.
But
We always like to make a speech.
Other people have also made a speech,
Okay.
right? And so I guess my question is do you see what we have seen as homeschoolers in the state? Here's my question. As homeschoolers in the state, we have seen different private organizations coming in, and over time, the regulations have grown. Do you anticipate, right now you anticipate that there are no regulations, right? Do you anticipate in the future that those regulations, as things work themselves out, and you see accountability and the need for accountability, do you see that those regulations would need to be put into place?
So, first of all, thank you for, I appreciate what you've done with your own family. I think it's impressive what you've done. And I can identify with you because I've homeschooled my kids. And I've never taken any state money at all for any of my kids. I have 4 kids that are being homeschooled, or 3 that are being homeschooled right now. And so I can understand your position. To answer your question, no more, I wouldn't expect a problem with accountability for this program any more than I would for any homeschooling system. It's always a threat for you, unfortunately, for us. It's always a threat. So I don't think that it's a realistic argument against this, because it's really the same threat that's a possibility for any education system, unfortunately. I would go on to say that what we'd love to see, and we're not giving money to private institutions, I want to make that clear. This is a savings account, and then people can use it as they want to. But this would open up the ability for some families that, and my family, we're a one-income family, and we made sacrifices, and we had many years we had one car when all of our friends had two cars, you know, so I get it, I know what you're saying. But there are situations in our families that don't have even one income that can cover what it would take. And so we'd like the ability to take some of the funds that are being funneled into our state education system and make it a possibility for all families to have, and you said it's, I think, did you say $12,000 or $10,000 for Ambrose?
$10,000 a year without supplies and uniforms.
$10,000 without supplies. So actually, they only have to pay, you know, $4,000. And so, yes, it would open up the possibility for families to take advantage of that in some situations. And so what we're trying to do is give as much flexibility and possibilities to families. And we have to all look at this and realize that every single child is different. My father's a retired physical therapist. He treated patients for over 45 years. And although we all have fingers, and I mean, the majority of us have all of the same equipment, our bodies, right? Every body is actually different. He said he'd treat people and they could study all they wanted and make these rules of exactly how you treat everyone. But because everybody's body's different, he had to look at them individually and figure out how to take care of them. Our education system is the same. We have to look at every student. Some students may not catch on the math right away, and then suddenly there's like, they catch it and it all just makes sense really fast. But they would have maybe been called learning disabled and had a stigma associated with them. I think the reality is that since everyone's different, parents should be able to really have as much ability as possible to find a way that they can take care of their students. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I just want to add something, and Senator Taves made a good point, that the money here is not going to private individuals, companies, etc. But it's going to the families. But sometimes we talk about public money, and we're talking about spending the public's money, and we are following students. And I want to remind all of us that this public money didn't just fall out of the sky. That the families that would participate in these ESAs are paying into that public pool of money. They're providing that. This is money that's put in trust by all of us. And so we want to take this money, and if I consider that a long time ago, we're talking more than 100 years ago, we're in the United States of America. And what other service in government, what other thing do we provide in the United States of America where we have decided this biggest thing that state government does? And America is a place that's supposed to be known as an economy that is of capitalism, and we have designed this public education system that is the true definition of a monopoly, and frankly, it's a socialistic monopoly, if I can speak very frankly. We literally have created this socialistic monopoly and that the government runs and said this is how we want to educate everybody unless you can privately afford to go do something else. And so but in the meantime, from all those people who are privately affording to go do something else, we are acting like they're not paying into this thing. And so what we want to do is we want to take that public trust money and we want to create options for the people that this one-size-fits-all system is not currently well serving. And that's all we're doing. And we're starting out with this tiny little effort that is in addition to what we are going to continue to do, which is to properly fund, because it's our constitutional responsibility, this socialistic monopoly, government school system. We're talking about in addition to, because we have overtaxed people and we have the money to be able to afford to do that. And our goal is to increase the performance and the success of our Idaho children. because many of them are not succeeding, they're falling behind. And if we're talking about thousands of students falling behind, that is a significant impact on the success of all of Idaho, the economic prosperity of all of Idaho, the moral consistency of all of Idaho, and a lot of other things.
That's very interesting. The individual needs, the individual child, what a concept.
We're just going to take a couple more questions because we don't want to keep you guys here all night. We will be around for a little bit, so you can. Okay, right over here.
Hi, my name's Josie Christensen. How do you predict the Idahoans will feel about spending tax dollars on private religious schools? And I myself am a Christian, but what if some of those private religious schools are not Christian? Maybe they're Jewish, maybe they're Islamic, maybe it's a group of parents that have gotten together and they want their LGBT kids to be able to feel like they're in a safe place. How are we going to handle that? How do you think Idahoans are going to feel about that?
Did everybody hear her question? Okay.
Just decide where you want your kid to go.
Yeah, my first response to that would be, how do you think Christians feel about spending tax dollars on our existing public education system? Values that are truly antithetical to the majority of religious Idahoans. My second response to that would be, which thank you for your question, it's very important. We've addressed several times that you're not directly funding private schools or any particular institution, you're funding families' private choices. And that's what's important because families know what's best for their children, they deserve the opportunity to make decisions for them.
Right.
So the tax money going into those other religious organizations, you think?
So with an education savings account, families can use funds to completely customize their children's education. So they're not just saying, I choose a private school. They can homeschool, they can homestead, they can start a micro school, they can do anything they can dream of within the eligible education expenses.
So are we okay with funding schools that are satanic? A satanic church wants to start a school. Are we okay with that?
So part of the
our tax money go to satanic church.
part of the problem with public education is that you're always going to be funding something that you disagree with. That's the inherent problem with subsidizing education, period. It's an extremely controversial issue. The question before us when it comes to an education savings account is, do you believe that families have the right to make free choices for their families based on what they believe? It's not what question is right or wrong. If you like what the public school teaches, if you like being taught critical race theory, you can keep your kid in your local school. Maybe your school isn't teaching critical race theory, but a lot of them are. I know of several programs in Idaho that teach it. Therefore, if you don't agree with that, you should be able to take your money elsewhere. But we're already funding many ideologically corrupt ideas. This is about choice, and it's not about discriminating between those choices.
And let me just add one other thing. You know, we give options to a lot of people. You know, we have local welfare programs where we provide food stamps. We don't force people to go to just one grocery store.
Amen.
We allow them to go to whatever grocery store they would like to go to. They can spend that money, and it is taxpayer money that they are spending.
And they didn't pay it.
And so we allow that choice. And so that's all we're wanting to do is we want to make sure that parents have choices for their kids. And again, we are funding students. We do not want to fund the system. We are wanting to fund the student. So in that ability is choice. And when it's universal, we're including everybody in there. Okay, the gentleman in the blue.
Okay, first of all, I think that we're here tonight, so you guys have done a lot of research on this, and we appreciate your service. Yes. But my question is, how does this address our population and the overcrowding in our schools today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, and I'll give my answer, and then whoever else can give theirs. So again, this would create competition, and where we have crowding in our schools, it opens up the ability for parents to be able to utilize other types. So if you have one public school that your child goes to, and it's a crowded school, then you might be able to take your dollars and go to a private school, or you could open up a model school or start homeschooling. So it actually helps kind of, I would think, in my mind, alleviate some of those issues of overcrowding, because now you're able to go to other locations. You're not stuck in one spot. And there are going to be families that are going to choose other types of education opportunities for their kids, so they probably will take them. Again, we're only talking to begin with about 1%, but that will probably grow. Just like with charter schools. Remember when we didn't have charter schools in the area? All we had was public or private. That was pretty much it. And then the charter schools started coming in, and people started choosing those, and they did pull their students out of the traditional school that they were attending. moved them over to a charter school, and so it did help alleviate some of the congestion at the school that they were in. So I see this as it works out a lot of those issues that our public schools do face with not having enough staff or teachers and overcrowding issues, because now that family can take that student and their dollars and go somewhere else if they need to. Did you want to add or?
I was just gonna say, there's a few more questions, but we did want to wrap this up by 8 because we're all, because it's 8 and we're all got kids and lives and stuff. But we'll hang out till we have to physically leave by 8:30, so we'll hang out here for a while. Out in the hallway right here, we just ask that nobody wanders around the building, and if you're gonna exit, we're gonna go to the right. But we would love to do this all night, but we unfortunately cannot. We want to try and wrap up by 8, which is in about 4 minutes. So thank you everybody for coming. We're going to be hanging out here, so just come ask us what you do. Thank you.
Sorry.
just so that I'd get a little bit of the crowd for her. Yeah, it's Tammy's. Tammy's. Whatever laws are regulating whatever you want. It's still on.
She's still broadcasting.
I'm gonna ask her if she wants to. I know, right? Zoom into his ear.
Should I narrate? Should I narrate? Can I narrate? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're here at the Lincoln Auditorium here in the Boise Capitol, in Boise, Idaho. And what we're seeing right now is a beautiful gentleman with a nice hat. It's a beautiful shade of blue, and he has a beard, and he has his hand over the beard for some reason. I don't know. And there's a lady, I think that's a lady. Excuse me.
Dear me. Look at, they're laughing at you.
You're laughing with me.
One or the other, or both.
You gotta laugh, right? Oh, yeah. Oh.
It's
They have had I need to laugh. My first day of subbing, okay? It was the juvenile delinquent school down in Ventura County. Me and this other teacher were at lunchtime, you know, and all the misfits were eating free lunch naturally. And I asked the teacher, what do you think of all this? He goes, well, if it wasn't so sad, it'd be funny. I'll never forget that.
I still think it's funny when people ask, well, school choice. Why are we funding something? You're giving the parent the right to take the same dollars they paid in, that you paid in, to use somewhere else. I'm just pissed that bonds and levies and everything that we're still paying for the infrastructure. Rick and Morty.
My son, luckily, is able to send his daughter to Amherst.
Yeah.
He pays in the public school system.
Everybody's